No, it's, just the supermarket, really. I think any butchers who are still going, they must be really, really good. You've got to have a reason to go to them, I think, because the supermarket's too damn easy.
We're talking a queue at the counter here to get your
Wow.
meat.
Really?
And it is. It's a really good butcher's. But Peter Tim's meats the sausages are also available in supermarkets. Gosh, I'm doing a really good plug for him here, aren't I? But yeah, no, you go into their shop in Edgware and it's always...
But do you go out of your way to actually go to a dedicated butchery?
I will for lamb shanks.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that Chris. I don't think that the Peter Tim's Meats person is going to be joining us. Actually, we're trying to get hold of him. If you are listening in, Chris, pick up that phone so we can have a talk to you and congratulate you on your award. But
he'll be busy serving customers in that shop. That's what'll be the story. He'll be flat out.
He'll be flat out. Do you think so? We talked yesterday. One of the reasons why we wanted to get another opinion on the types of food people eat, Alan. And yesterday we talked about veggie burgers and vegetable meats.
Yeah. When I was in China once upon a time, in Xi'an, I got taken to a restaurant that was fully vegetarian, but they dressed it up as meat. So it looked like a steak that you're eating. It looked like rissoles and everything, but it was purely vegetarian. So all of the fat along the side of the steak was gelatin or something like that, and it just tasted like meat. It was quite remarkable. Absolutely incredible. You wouldn't know you weren't eating meat. Amazing.
Tasty?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yep. So I don't know how they did it, but it was all
So you're
vegetable.
a supporter, Jenny Morton, are you a supporter of plant-based meats yourself?
Look, I'm a bit of a supporter of plant-based diets. I was vegan for about a year until I gave up because I found it too hard, which shows once again, how shallow I can be. But I don't kind of get the thing, if you choose to be plant-based, why you're trying to eat something that resembles meat. I mean, if you like plant-based food and it tastes good and you can make some amazing meals, and people do.
Right.
I don't kind of get the idea of trying to make it seem like meat.
Okay, well, let's have Chris Timms is on now. He's the owner of Peter Tim's Meats. And we've been talking about you, Chris.
Oh, have you? Oh, good.
Yeah. What have you been busy? You've been busy serving customers.
Yeah, no, busy working here.
Whoa! Congratulations! What's the secret? What's some of the most popular sausages there?
We've got quite a few actually. We do quite a few. But we do a German bratwurst, a hot Hungarian, which is pretty popular, and a smashed strip. So,
okay,
the most popular ones we've got there.
Right, yeah, Jenny here on the panel, Chris, says that you're a bit of a local identity in terms of butcheries. But I wanted to ask you, in terms of the destination butchers' stores, there's still a market for them? Because in an era where they're declining, there is still a market for a good local butchery?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's one of those arts that the good ones that survive, and we've got a good, quite a few good butcheries in Christchurch, and it's a tribute to the having all those sort of awards.
Yeah,
recognise all those people that the sort of good job they're doing.
How long have you been going?
Long time.
Yeah,
long time.
1886.
Yeah, been in it for a while. Yeah.
Good on you, Chris. All right, Alan, thank you very much. Jenny, thank you very much. It's been wonderful having you both on the panel. Thank you. I'm Wallace Chapman. See you for Thursday, 3:45. Bye.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, Northland police are ordered to arm after a kidnapping and an officer is shot at. A pack and save is fined almost 80k for overcharging customers. A man accused of stalking and killing his ex-wife was allegedly fixated on getting rid of her. Accusations fishing companies are overlooking local labour in favour of foreign crews who will work for less. The countdown's on to the ferns versus the roses, and Halloween it's frightfully fraught in these COVID times, but that's not the only thing turning a sweet celebration sour. And an update on the Black Panther allegedly prowling the bike tracks of Canterbury.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leatawa tēnei. The police in Northland are carrying firearms as they hunt for two men who shot at an officer early yesterday morning. The officer was alone in a patrol car on State Highway 11 near Puketona Junction, south of Kerikeri. She escaped uninjured but shaken with a damaged windscreen. The police are investigating possible links to a man being kidnapped in the area on the same night. No arrests have been made yet in either case. And the Far North Mayor John Carter says locals are unnerved.
I am aware that there is concern, interest, support, some anger within our community as well.
The Far North Mayor John Carter. Greens co-leader James Shaw is staying tight-lipped on reports he has been offered the Climate Change Minister role. Labour and the Greens had their third round of discussions on a governing relationship this afternoon. Both sides say the talks are on track to wrap up by the end of the week. RNZ understands Mr Shaw has been offered the climate change portfolio as a minister outside of Cabinet, but he says he won't comment on speculation.
We can't speculate on speculation. We won't be commenting on the content of the negotiations until we've concluded.
James Shaw says while talks are in the concluding stages, the deal has yet to be finalised. The Commerce Commission says consumers should be able to trust they aren't being overcharged at the till. Today it was revealed Pack and Save Mangere was fined $78,000 for price discrepancies found in 2018. It was found to have been charging a higher price at the till to what was advertised or displayed on the shelf. Commission Chair Anna Rawlings says this is not good enough.
Well, consumers really need to be able to trust the price that they see displayed, and they need to be able to trust that the price they expect to pay is the price that they actually pay at the till.
The Commerce Commission Chair Anna Rawlings. The former flatmate of a man accused of stabbing his ex-wife to death in West Auckland says he was obsessed with killing her. Lee Manchau is on trial at the High Court in Auckland after pleading not guilty to murder and breaching a protection order. He's accused of killing his ex-wife, Yang Jimin, fatally attacked with a hunting knife on Westgate Drive in Massey last July. Today, his former flatmate said Mr Lee constantly talked about killing his ex-wife, even showing him a box of weapons.
He showed me a hunting knife which he had bought and a meat cleaver, and that was the interesting thing with the meat cleaver, because he said to me, you think this would be enough to kill somebody with.
The former flatmate of a man on trial for murdering his ex-wife. The founder of a support group for people who suffered mesh complications says it expects many more people to come forward now ACC has indicated it will consider their claims. ACC is to reassess claims for surgical mesh injuries it previously declined, as well as new claims, Catherine Hutton reports.
ACC's announcement means almost 400 people could have their claims reassessed under new clinical guidelines. It says under the new guidelines, where there's clear evidence of mesh erosion or extrusion, specific nerve damage, surgical error or infection caused by treatment, it's now likely to accept the claim. Mesh Down Under says it has almost 1,000 members and it hopes they will now lodge a claim. ACC says those wanting to have a mesh claim considered should contact them or a medical professional. This is Catherine Hutton.
The next census will collect information on gender and sexual identity for the first time. The census is the official count of population and dwellings conducted every 5 years. Stats NZ says collecting more data on sex, gender and sexual identity will better inform decision-making both for and about minority groups. It says more will also be done to reach Māori participants, and the agency will work with iwi, community groups and technical experts to update the census for 2023. It's 4 minutes past 5. The Silver Ferns are odds-on favourites to extend their winning streak against England in tonight's opening game of the 3-match Tiny Jamison Trophy Netball Series in Hamilton. Sports reporter Felicity Reid has more.
The world champion Silver Ferns have beaten the Roses twice in the last 15 months, both times in England, and are favourites to continue the winning run on their home court this week. Tonight's game is the Ferns' first international match in 9 months, and the first time the world number 3 England squad have played any level of competitive netball since May due to the COVID-19 restrictions. Due to the disruption of the international netball calendar, world ranking points are not on offer during this series. The test starts at 7:30. This is Felicity Reid.
The Wellington Phoenix have signed 2 more players for the next A-League season. Defender James McGarry and midfielder Clayton Lewis have both signed 1-year deals. McGarry, the son of former All-White Michael McGarry, has spent the past 2 years in the Netherlands. Lewis joins the Phoenix after playing last season with Auckland City. He has played 14 games for the All-Whites. The Phoenix head to Australia next week to prepare for the start of the A-League after Christmas. The Los Angeles Dodgers have won Major League Baseball's World Series for the first time in 22 years. The Dodgers have beaten the Tampa Bay Rays 3-1 in Game 6 to clinch the series 4-2. That's the news.
The Transport Agency comes under fire.
Once the agency had admitted to the mislocations just at the end of last week, it then checked 23 nearby crashes and found 2 of those had also been mislocated.
A COVID-safe Halloween.
If you're handing out lollies to kids, you hand out wrapped up lollies. That's actually just generally good practice that we'd encourage people to do anyway.
A hit of freedom in Melbourne.
I'm off my face with excitement. I've got the shakes.
Your daily fix of news. Morning reports weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula, Waikato and Bay of Plenty. Fine spells, areas of morning, low cloud or fog, scattered showers, some heavy in inland Northland. Waitomo to Manawatu, including Taumaranui, Taupo and Taihape, mostly cloudy with a few showers. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay, Wairarapa, cloudy periods, isolated showers for Wairarapa tomorrow morning. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough, fine spells. Bulla and Westland, cloud increasing, periods of rain developing tonight. Canterbury, mainly fine, cloudy morning tomorrow and tomorrow night. Isolated showers about the high country tomorrow. For Fiordland, Otago and Southland, mostly fine, apart from areas of cloud morning and night. A few showers tomorrow, possibly heavy for central Otago tomorrow afternoon. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers. RNZ National at 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna, and welcome to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. Police in Northland are armed today with 2 gunmen who fired at an officer in her patrol car still on the run. The officer was driving along State Highway 11 south of Kirikiri when she was stopped by a car in front of her early yesterday morning. Police have yet to identify the men who shot at her, but are investigating whether they're connected to a spate of crimes in the far north on Monday night. Katie Todd reports.
The men were last seen wearing masks, emerging from a grey car on a stretch of State Highway 11 near Puketona Junction and firing at a female police officer around 3:45 yesterday morning. The random attack left her shaken but uninjured, her windscreen peppered with holes. Far North Mayor John Carter says locals are still unnerved. They're keen to see the men caught and held to account.
I am aware that there is concern, interest, support, some anger within our community as well.
While the shooting happened at an intersection south of Kirikiri, police officers have been investigating links to other locations across the far north. They're carrying firearms as a precaution, while a team of investigators try to work out who the 2 men are. At the heart of the investigation is a possible link to a kidnapping on the same night in Waipapa, a short distance north, involving a grey Nissan Skyline car. Police say that car was set alight about 20 kilometres inland from the shooting scene 30 minutes after the officer was fired at, while the male victim was found north of Kirikiri in Matori Bay. Several offenders were involved in the kidnapping, but police say they haven't made any arrests. 2 dairies in Morewa and Paihia were also ram-raided with stolen cars on Monday night, but the incidents appear to be unrelated to the shooting. Mr Carter says not knowing where in the far north the 2 men could be is adding to people's concern.
That's part of the worry. They're, as I say, we're a good community up here. We're law-abiding. There's some challenges through welfare, and it's concerning people that we have 1 or 2 who tend to try and disrupt our way of life up here. Not acceptable.
Police say the officer who was fired at is being supported, but they won't say if they're continuing solo patrols. That's something that concerns Northland MP Matt King, whose son is a police officer.
That's just what happens with policing. You can be doing a routine stop and it can turn nasty really quickly, and my son wasn't working that shift, and I'm thankful of that because he works in that area and he could have been on and it could have been him. So I know the lady involved and she was working on her own. and I think that's crazy. Cops working on their own in the middle of the night.
The incident has prompted renewed calls from the Police Association for routine arming of officers, but Matt King wouldn't share his view.
I'm an ex-policeman and I'm an ex-frontline policeman, so you can pretty much gather from that. But the caucus is of the view at the moment that the status quo and let the Commissioner decide.
Police have declined interview requests around the shooting and are appealing for anyone with information about the incidents to get in touch. For Checkpoint, call Katie Todd, TNA.
A Pack and Save supermarket in the Auckland suburb of Mangere has been fined $78,000 for charging consumers more than the promotional prices on 6 occasions. The Commerce Commission says shoppers should be able to trust supermarket pricing, and Consumer New Zealand says there are likely many more victims of supermarkets overcharging at the till. Katie Doyle has the story.
Sliced salmon, mushrooms and avocados, all found to have been sold for more than what customers at Mangere Pack and Save had bargained for. On 6 occasions in 2018, the Pack and Save in Mangere charged a higher price at the checkout than what was displayed in store. The issue was raised with the supermarket after the Commerce Commission sent mystery shoppers in. The matter went to court, and in a decision that's been voiced, Judge McNaughton described the conduct as careless.
The pricing discrepancies related to a number of individual items across different departments of the supermarket, and they were repeated. The defendant did not immediately take steps to correct its pricing system.
The chair of the Commerce Commission, Anna Rawling, says consumers should be able to trust they aren't being overcharged at the till. She says that if a mistake is made, immediate steps should be taken to ensure the mistake isn't repeated.
Well, consumers really need to be able to trust the price that they see displayed, and they need to be able to trust that the price they expect to pay is the price that they actually pay at the till.
Consumer New Zealand's John Duffy says he's pleased the supermarket has been held to account. He believes overcharging happens more often than people may think.
So if you're doing a shop for a family, you'll have a full trolley of goods. You know, you might have kids around, there's lots of other distractions in a supermarket. You can't be there monitoring each item as it's scanned and comparing that with your memory of what that price was. It's just impossible. So consumers, there may well be more victims of this type of behaviour. It's just that it's really hard for consumers to detect.
While New Zealanders may not be big on complaining, Mr Duffy thinks it's important to call price discrepancies out, even if it means confronting store management.
I realise it can be awkward to do that sometimes. Afterwards, take the goods back in or email the supermarket with your complaint, or make a complaint to Consumer NZ or the Commerce Commission.
In a statement, the store's owner-operator Michael Kennedy says the mistakes are disappointing. He said significant steps had been taken to ensure this did not happen again, including additional in-store training. For Checkpoint, Katie Doyle.
It is 13 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Love to hear from you, especially on the supermarket pricing issue. Do you ever check your receipts against the price that you saw on the items? I mean, it's a difficult thing to do. Do you trust the prices that are on the products in the supermarket? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or flick us an email. The address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The mother of a baby who died after being attacked by the family dog in Hamilton says she wishes she could go back in time. The newborn baby died in Waikato Hospital yesterday after the attack on Sunday night. His mother has posted a photo on Facebook wishing she could return to the time when she was pregnant. Neighbours who rushed to help the mother and her baby say the woman had gone to the toilet when the family dog attacked the infant. Our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Simon Rogers spoke to some of the family's neighbours today.
I'm here in the street in the Hamilton suburb of Enderley where this horrific dog attack occurred on Sunday. Now, as we know, that attack left a 1-day-old baby boy dead. We spoke to one resident here today who said he was on the scene straight after the attack. He was one of a number of residents who rushed to the scene after the attack occurred to try and help the mother of this child. Now, we've seen on the gate of the property that a number of bouquets of flowers have been left and a number of messages of support for the family. As for the animal itself, well, that's currently at a Hamilton City Council animal control facility. The fate of that dog will be determined by the outcome of the police investigation, and the police say this matter has now been referred to the coroner. And that was our reporter Nick Trubridge reporting from Hamilton.
A spooky spat has broken out in an Auckland neighbourhood over the future of its iconic Halloween celebrations. Dignan Street in Point Chevalier usually welcomes hundreds of trick-or-treaters, but this year things are effectively being called off because of the skyrocketing number of kids looking for candy. Some households have cited COVID concerns, but others have raised questions about Halloween NIMBYism. Our cameraman Nick Munro and reporter Nita Blake-Person filed this report.
Tall trees and picturesque white picket fences are dotted along Auckland's Dignan Street. The neighbourhood looks as inviting as ever, but as Halloween nears, it's an unusually quiet time for the area.
Crazy, mad, fun, exciting. Parents dress up along with the kids, and it's fun, it's lovely. I really enjoy it. It's bigger than Trump.
Dignan Street has become synonymous with trick-or-treating. Hundreds of people flock there for twilight festivities. But not this year. Here's longtime lolly scramble supplier David Wood.
It's just got too big. And it was never organised, it's just sort of grown. And it's just grown out of hand. So why would you come from Ellerslie to Point Chev just because for lollies?
Monique Dalton agrees.
I sort of do 8 kgs of fruit bursts on any given year, and we run out over the course of the night. As residents, we've done it as something for the local kids, and it's been fun. I think we haven't done it because it's been expected of us, and I think it's got to a point where some out of Point Chev people have kind of come to expect that that's kind of the way it's become a tradition.
But news that time's up on the trick-or-treating extravaganza has somewhat polarised the street. A message declaring the majority of Dignan residents would not be partaking went out on Facebook. It stated they had been very generous over the years, particularly with growing numbers of visitors. Money usually spent on lollies would instead be donated to Canteen. But that came as a shock to Crystal Jones.
Went out and checked the letterbox to see if there was a note left about it, and there wasn't. So I was like, where is this? It's like come out of the blue. So yeah, so it seems like people are still keen to go ahead, but I don't know who are the people that are opting out of it, but it doesn't seem like it's really the majority.
She's not the only one put out by the plans being canned. Maddie Marcroft and her brother Rupert had been raring to go.
I'm a bit disappointed, but we definitely are going to go trick-or-treating on other streets. I guess it won't be as great as usual, but it'll still be fun.
Then there are those wondering exactly why the event's been called off. While COVID concerns are front of mind, locals spoken to by RNZ have questioned why the out-of-area message is necessary.
It's a bit of a shame, I guess. I don't sort of buy into, the Halloween side of things, but for the kids, it's a bit of a shame, given how, life's been pretty tough over the last few months.
I think it's a bit mean-spirited, actually, because I think it is so fun and the kids really look forward to it. And I'm not sure about out of town coming. I think a lot of people local do go to it, so it's hard to tell. But, I mean, it's always good vibes and fun.
While it's the end of the road for the hallowed Halloween houses of Dignan Street, celebrations will be taking part in plenty of other areas this Saturday. For Checkpoint, Nita Blake-Person.
So, Halloween can be frightfully fraught for a number of reasons. COVID, kids roaming the streets taking treats from strangers, and of course the sugar hangover. So Checkpoint's gone to the top. Dr. Harriet Carr, Deputy Director of Public Health, for some advice on navigating this potential house of horrors.
We're really lucky in New Zealand in our current situation that we can even consider trick-or-treating at this time of year with the COVID situation that we're in at the moment. But as you appreciate, there's a number of precautions that we, or caveats to that we certainly want people to adhere to. So one of the things particularly is precautions that we want people to take given the COVID-19 pandemic is if anyone is self-isolating and have been told that they need to stay away from others, then we recommend that they put a sign outside their house not to trick or treat. Equally, anyone that is sick or feeling unwell should not go trick-or-treating and should also put a sign outside their house, no trick-or-treating. So that's a really good way that people can both protect themselves and protect others. Even if they're not sure whether they've got COVID-19, they're just sick, that's a really important thing that we really want people to do this year.
So if someone chucks out a sign, people should consider it a no-go zone. It might not be that they're just not keen on Halloween. It could be because they're worried that they're ill.
Yes, so it's to protect them and others. So people should really respect that and honour those people's wishes around not participating in trick or treating.
So if people are participating, even then it kind of seems counterintuitive to be putting your hands in a lolly bowl, handing out stuff to multiple people who are coming and going, when we've had this whole period of kind of staying away from other people, not breathing on them, not touching them, does seem counterintuitive.
Yeah, so we are at alert level 1, so that means that we are a little bit more relaxed. But having said that, there are precautions that people should be taking, and so we've already addressed the actual, can we eliminate the risk? So where someone might be sick, then they shouldn't participate. If they are participating, then there's other additional precautions that they can take. So anyone handling food or lolly should always make sure their hands are clean, so they've washed their hands, or if children are going trick-or-treating, then that they've got hand sanitizer with them if they're going to be eating food or handling food as well. Then there's also people noting down where they've been, so that might be a manual entry if there's a parent going with the children, noting down which houses they're going to. For people who are participating from their houses, there is the opportunity for them to download a COVID app thing, a COVID QR code for their house, so that people can scan that.
So you would recommend that? You would recommend that, Harriet, that there is actually a sign at your front door or your gate where people can use the app to say that they've been to your house?
That's an option, but a lot of children won't have cell phones necessarily or be able to do that. So the simplest way is to keep a record of where you've been. But for areas where there's large numbers of people coming to the houses, certain streets seem to attract a large number of visitors. That might be an option for those particular areas where they're expecting people that they may not know. Some of the other ways there's different ways that you can celebrate Halloween as well. So there's the traditional trick-or-treating, and ways to make that a bit safer is to pre-identify which houses your children are going to go to in advance, working with other families, so that it's sort of like creating a safe zone. You know who lives at that house, and your children might really be in contact with those children. So you can create a sort of a safe zone mapped out. Otherwise, you can have a Halloween party as well, where you've got a small group of children that you invite to your house.
The other thing that could be an advantage, Doctor, is, it's a costume-themed event. So, a mask wouldn't be that out of the ordinary.
Yes, that's something that people could consider as well. But generally, our advice around masks is when you're in enclosed, crowded situations. So if you're out on the street, that wouldn't generally be our advice, but I'm sure there will be a lot of costumes this year that take on a COVID theme.
So putting COVID to one side at the moment, this is probably one of the few occasions where we encourage our children to go out and get a huge haul of sugar-infested treats. Do you have any advice sort of around the obesity and balance of dealing with this particular festival?
Yes, it's a tricky festival from a nutrition perspective, as traditionally the expectations of children are that they will get sweets. The advice that we've given in the past is there's ways to reduce that, so that you can offer healthier alternatives like fruit or non-food treats like stickers, depending on the age of the children. And I've also heard of people offering toothbrushes or little tubes of toothpaste. So there's different things you can do which don't have to be lollies. If you are doing lollies, then it's actually looking at is perhaps reducing the number of lollies. And for parents going around with children, it might be actually that your children have a smaller treat bag so that it fills up faster. So there's different ways. There's offering alternatives, reducing the amount that's given and looking at other healthy options.
Have you seen the way a child looks at you when you offer them a mandarin instead of like a mini chocolate bar?
That's when it comes down to a sales job and their expectations, and that's where sometimes things like stickers or something else which is exciting to them, but may not be a lolly, or that might be an option. But there are always children out there. We have this perception that all children prefer lollies, but actually you'll probably find that there'll be one or two in any group that actually might prefer the mandarin.
And that was Dr. Harriet Carr. I'm really interested in your feedback on this. Couple of issues there. She was suggesting that you could give out the odd toothbrush instead of lollies. What do you make of that? And do you actually participate in Halloween? Let me know your thoughts. Also on the other issue of whether streets should welcome children from outside of their neighbourhood. We saw that example in Point Chev where some of them are saying too many kids coming in from outside of the neighbourhood. I mean, how do you tell that a child is from outside of your neighbourhood? Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. In around 2 hours' time, the Silver Ferns will play the first international netball match since COVID-19 disrupted the sport. New Zealand's hosting the England Roses in a 3-test series starting in Hamilton tonight. Sports reporter Bridget Tunnicliffe is at Claudelands Arena in Hamilton. Bridget, how significant is this series for New Zealand netball?
Yeah, Lisa, it is pretty significant. I mean, netball in New Zealand is the largest female participation sport for women, and it would have been pretty depressing if there wasn't a test series that went ahead before the end of 2020. New Zealand netball did try hard to set up something with the Australian Diamonds, our closest rivals, but logistically it was just too difficult. But this is the next best thing. England are ranked 3rd in the world, so this is a pretty good test for the Silver Ferns, who are looking to build towards the next World Cup.
So you kind of touched on it there, how it's fraught to get teams here. So tell us about the England Roses and what they have been through to get here.
Yeah, well, then when they arrived, of course, they had to do 2 weeks quarantine, and they only actually got out of quarantine about 6 days ago. And pretty much on the eve of them coming over here, their coach, Jess Thirlby, was tested positive. She had a positive COVID test, so she wasn't able to travel with the Roses to New Zealand. There is an assistant coach on the ground here, but it's not really the same as having the head coach here. And the English netballers haven't had a lot of netball. Their domestic league was cancelled back, I think it was in March this year, so only got about 3 rounds in. So they've been really short of netball over there. And yes, they have gone through a lot to get here, but I think they're just relieved and happy to be here.
So how are we looking, the Silver Ferns, going into this match?
Pretty good, I reckon. Over the weekend, the Silver Ferns had a bit of a shock win over the New Zealand men in Palmerston North. It wasn't really expected. And Coach Dame Nolene Tauro has run some pretty tough camps over the past few weeks as well. And she's created a lot of internal competition in the wider Silver Ferns squad. This, I guess, is an opportunity. Over the past 18 months, we've had the retirements of Maria Folau, Casey Kopua, and recently Laura Langman. So this is a real chance for players like Jane Watson, Emilian Ignacio and Gina Crampton to go forward and really have as much influence on this team as those past greats have. And I do have a lady here, Jenny Wiley, from CEO of Netball New Zealand. I'm sure you're very excited about tonight's game, and a lot of work has gone into it. How good is it to be hosting the first international netball since COVID?
Oh, I think that's fantastic. It's such a testament to the work that has gone on behind the scenes, and as you mentioned earlier, having England really willing to come out here and participate has been, absolutely massive. So look, we're delighted and can't wait to see international netball back on the courts.
I remember during the ANZ Premiership we saw a big spike in viewership from overseas, people wanting to watch our ANZ Premiership competition because they had nothing going on over there. Do you think we might see another spike in people trying to get their netball fix and watching these tests from around the world?
Look, and that's the feedback we're getting. There was a lot of interest generated offshore, obviously with the Cadbury series and New Zealand, the Silver Ferns playing the men's, and I think we're just seeing that momentum build, and now people know netball is back on. And we're playing the reigning Commonwealth Games champions tonight, so it's going to be a great 3-test series.
How important is it for the Silver Ferns to get this kind of competition?
Oh, it's vital. I mean, we were world champs last year. but being able to maintain that momentum, get those new combinations out there on court. Nolene is learning the style of the players, she's adapting their play, and you're going to see a different set of Silver Ferns out there this week.
And I'm sure it goes without saying that Netball New Zealand is trying as hard as it can to set up something with the Australian Diamonds, maybe early next year if we're lucky.
Well, Australia are our biggest foe in terms of netball. It's such a fierce rivalry. So, whatever the new year might bring, we need to make a couple of different iterations of plans. But, I can see Australia certainly featuring highly in those.
Thank you, Jenny. That's Netball New Zealand CEO. The crowd will start filtering in shortly for the start of the game at 7:30 tonight in Claudelands Arena. Back to you, Lisa.
Thanks, Bridget. That is Bridget Tunnicliffe there at Claudelands Arena in Hamilton. And she was speaking there to Jenny Wiley, as she said, from the CEO of New Zealand Netball. And they are expecting a big crowd there. And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, done with the MP farewells, Judith Collins turns her attention to what to do with her slimmed down caucus. The Greens believe they're closing in on a deal with Labour, and Wellington's Library is in line for a shape-up, but at what cost? Hey, and we've got an update on the Black Panther allegedly prowling the paths of Canterbury. We would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening, particularly your thoughts on Halloween, what you're doing, if you're participating or not, especially in these kind of COVID times. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time now for the headlines with Susanna.
Police in Northland are carrying firearms, while two men who shot at an officer early yesterday morning remain on the loose. The officer, who was alone in a patrol car on State Highway 11, escaped uninjured but shaken. The police are investigating links to people who kidnapped a man nearby on the same night. No arrests have been made yet. The former flatmate of a man accused of stabbing his ex-wife to death in West Auckland says he was obsessed with killing her. Young German was fatally attacked with a hunting knife in Massey last July. Lee Manchao is on trial at the High Court in Auckland after pleading not guilty to murder and breaching a protection order. Today, his former flatmate said Mr. Lee constantly talked about killing his ex-wife, even showing him a box of weapons. The Labour and Green parties say talks on a governing relationship are on track to wrap up by the end of the week. They had their third round of discussions this afternoon. RNZ understands the Greens co-leader James Shaw has been offered the climate change portfolio as a minister outside of Cabinet. The National Party leader Judith Collins is backing Jerry Brownlee to stay on as deputy, but says in the end it's up to caucus. There are question marks over Mr Brownlee's future after his role in the election defeat as campaign chair and losing the long-held seat of Ilam. A support group for people who have suffered complications from surgical mesh expects many more people to come forward. Now ACC has indicated it will consider their claims. ACC will reassess claims it previously declined as well as new claims. The group Mesh Down Under says it has almost 1,000 members and it hopes they will now lodge a claim. A magnitude 4.8 earthquake hit the Upper South Island this afternoon. The quake just after 4 o'clock was centred near Seddon at a depth of 31 kilometres. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. And it's time now to get to the business news with Nicholas Poynton, who's joined me in the studio. Nicholas, the head of Kiwi Bank has weighed in on what the government should be doing to support the economy. And so what are the reckons then?
So, Steve Urologist says the government should be looking to hand out direct grants to businesses that have been hammered by the pandemic. That's opposed to dishing out loans. So this is not the first time we've heard this. Plenty of small business advocacy groups have said the same thing, but this is the first time we've had the head of a major bank come out and call for such action. And Urologist, he does say that the fiscal and monetary response to date has been swift, it's been appropriate and welcomed by many, but he says there's been quite a tepid response to this government-backed loan scheme. He says that's probably because, he says it is because the application process and the conditions to apply have been really, really complicated. He also says that businesses at the moment lack lack confidence given the prevailing uncertainty that is in the economy at the moment. He says to take on debt, businesses need to have confidence. They need to be sure that they can service this debt in the future. And given this, businesses going into debt at the moment, it's not the best way, he says, for businesses to really improve their cash flow at the moment. His suggestion then is for direct grants to those struggling businesses. But he did have other ideas, such as big businesses stepping in to pay for the bills of smaller businesses. I'm not really sure how that would go down, but there have been plenty of big banks and financial firms coming out at the moment, these big PR campaigns saying that they're here to back small businesses at the moment. Makes me wonder if they would really put their money where their mouth is and do something like this.
Did he give any indication of what sort of sums he was talking about in terms of direct support?
I don't have that detail in front of me, unfortunately.
Okay, well, what you do have is some data, new data, that shows manufacturing and construction are the big revenue winners on this side of lockdown.
Yeah, sure. So, new figures out from the software accounting firm Xero. They specialise in getting the software out to small businesses, and it shows year-on-year revenue across the board was up nearly 3.5%. But those small businesses in the manufacturing sector, they had the most significant jump. That was up by about 11%. Similarly, construction and retail trade, that was up by about 8%. And what is absolutely key here is what this means for job creation. And according to Xero's Craig Hudson, he says the number of people employed by small businesses is only 1.8% lower than pre-COVID levels. That's a 1.1% on the previous month. And job creation in the private sector, that is absolutely paramount at the moment. Yesterday we had this big outlook report from the ANZ Bank, and it was sort of in line with what we were hearing from Kiwi Bank, what I was talking about before. And it's really talked up that need for continual support for the private sector to continue to hire and invest, because there is going to be a point when this big injection of fiscal stimulus from the government is going to have to tail off, but the private sector needs to be able to pick up the reins when that time comes. And one of the recommendations ANZ made was for the government to actually consider cutting the tax rate for lower income earners rather than actually increasing the minimum wage. They say it will have the same desired effect, that is income in the back pockets of low income earners, but without actually hurting businesses who are really struggling during a time like this.
So the government would carry the can for that and a loss of revenue versus a business having to up their wage
And
bill.
I guess what the bank is saying is, in 2022, when it's picking for that recovery to really take hold, that the private sector would be well poised in a situation like this, to use the term they were saying, take the reins at that point.
Interesting. And what was going on in the markets today?
Yeah, so the NZX Top 50 had a bit of a feeble attempt at clawing back some of yesterday's loss when it had its worst day in 6 weeks, as it closed down about 218 points. It closed up today by about 12 points. That's 0.1% to 12,265. Our dollar is currently buying 67 US cents, 93.8 Australian and 51.4 British pence.
Got a gold number for me?
No, I won't talk about gold until
you've gone cold on the gold.
Well, we're going cold on gold. I'll talk about it next when there's something interesting to say.
Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton with our business news there. It's tough talks and difficult decisions for the National Party as Judith Collins eyes a possible caucus shake-up. She's meeting one-on-one with MPs over the coming days to divvy out roles and responsibilities following a full caucus meeting this morning. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Judith Collins put out the call, and to the capital they came, a full caucus catch-up. The second since the election, a chance again to canvass the campaign's collapse.
It's been a brutal election for us.
Pretty tough when you've got a red tide like that.
The red wave came through, so you're going to have red wave through your bank accounts from now on.
It wasn't a great year for us, everyone knows that.
It's a result that's hard to move past, but move past it they must. That is Judith Collins' message. Last week was for farewells, the review is for forensics. This week, the caucus must look to the future.
I have asked every MP to have a 30-minute meeting with me over the next 2 days.
And so it begins, an audience with Judith Collins, a place to air grievances and raise concerns. Some are sure to be awkward. Think Denise Lee, the MP who criticised her leader's judgment in an all-caucus email in the heat of the campaign that then got leaked.
All going to be behind closed doors, so thanks for asking, but that's where the appropriate context is.
The one-on-one meetings are part performance review, part job application. MPs will make their case for what responsibilities they should get. And with a smaller caucus, there are more jobs to go around. Judith Collins hinting a shake-up could be on the cards.
It's quite good to test MPs in areas that they haven't had before, and often they find it actually much more interesting because they've got new things to learn, new stakeholders to meet with, and they generally are, I think, often bring a real energy to it.
One position to keep an eye on is the deputy leadership currently held by Jerry Brownlee. He has questions to answer as the campaign chair, responsible in part for the dismal result. And asked whether he wants to stay in the role, he's circumspect.
I want what's best for the National Party. I've been a deputy before, I've stepped aside before, whatever's best for our caucus moving forward.
I'm very happy to have the decision made by the caucus, and I'm very happy to have Jerry as our deputy. He has been a great stalwart, and he is a great stalwart.
Do you think that he should stay on as deputy?
Well, that's a matter for the caucus.
Caucus members, including the former leaders Simon Bridges and Todd Muller, threw their support behind the current leadership duo today.
Can you rule out another Todd for leadership?
Yes.
Completely?
Yes.
Never again?
Never again. I was very strong support for Judith.
But note this exchange with Mark Mitchell, the MP who ran against Judith Collins to be leader in July.
Can you completely rule out him running for the leadership?
Yeah, I'm completely ruling out running for the leadership, absolutely.
What about deputy leadership?
Deputy leadership, yeah, look, I'm ruling that out at the moment as well.
At the moment. The caucus has a lot to consider over the coming weeks, not least a confidence vote in the leadership after the election result is finalised next week. That could bring more bad news for National. The special votes tend to favour the left, which means still more National MPs may be headed out the door. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
The Greens say they're in the concluding stages of their talks with Labour on a governing arrangement. The parties met for their third round of talks in the Prime Minister's office this afternoon. While a final decision hasn't yet been reached, co-leaders Marama Davidson and James Shaw say they're on track for hammering something out by the end of the week. Both were staying tight-lipped about what's being discussed, but say the deal they put to members will be the one they believe is worth supporting. Here's political reporter Yvette McCullough.
With little of substance to offer the media, the co-leaders came out today with a plate of biscuits.
There you go.
The whole plate.
Yeah. We know you have a thing about biscuits, so there we go.
Marama Davidson says talks are in their final stages, with a few points to still nail down.
So we're getting towards the end, which I think indicates that we're making good progress. All along with the back and forth, which has been ongoing over this past week and a half, it's just about narrowing things down, getting things down to the final point, and we're making good progress.
But she is staying mum on what's been decided and what's still up for discussion.
All of that will be revealed when we finally have an agreement to share with the rest of the country, which hopefully will be in a couple of days.
While the situation is still fluid, RNZ understands James Shaw has been offered the climate change portfolio as a minister outside of Cabinet.
We can't speculate on speculation. We won't be commenting on the content of the negotiations until we've concluded.
RNZ also understands Ms Davidson will be offered a ministerial role too, but which one is yet to be decided.
So again, I am not going to talk about any of the content of the negotiations.
National leader Judith Collins was reluctant to comment on the talks today, saying they were Jacinda Ardern's problem, not hers. She was asked whether this shows that Labour needs the Greens to help bolster ministerial experience in government.
No, it shows that Labour might want the Greens to blame them for any decisions that they make.
In a statement, a spokesperson for the Prime Minister said conversations continued to progress well today, with talks on track to wrap up by the end of the week. Once a deal is finalised, it will be put to Green Party members, who need to back it with a 75% majority for it to happen.
We will put something up that, that we feel is worth supporting, but ultimately it is their choice. And there is, as has been demonstrated in the media over the last few days, clearly a wide variety of opinions about, what our strategy should be.
The co-leaders say they might meet with Ms Ardern again tomorrow, but that depends on the progress officials make behind the scenes overnight. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
It's 16 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A lot of you getting in touch about this Pack and Save in Mangere that's been fined $78,000 for overcharging on certain items. Jim's got in touch to say, I catch pricing discrepancies almost weekly from my local supermarket. Some are possibly honest mistakes, says Jim, such as being charged more for expensive apple varieties than the variety I purchased. Others seem deliberate. The checkout always asks if I want a receipt, which annoys me a lot. They often seem surprised when I say yes. Everyone should take the receipt and check it when you get home, says Jim. Thanks for getting in touch. Do get in touch about that. I'm interested to know, do you check your receipt? Do you even take it and cross-check the prices? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Some fishing companies are being accused of overlooking qualified and competent New Zealanders in favour of bringing in foreign crews who will work in harsher conditions for less money. But a fishing industry executive says that's rubbish and there are simply not enough skilled and experienced Kiwis willing to do the work. Timothy Brown has more.
Here are the facts. The government has granted border exceptions for 570 foreign workers to operate deep-sea fishing trawlers off New Zealand. Those boats would have been tied up if workers could not be found, and fishing companies say foreigners were necessary to crew them. But that's where things get murky. Checkpoint has spoken to a marine engineer with more than a decade's experience at sea. He says when he's applied for jobs in the past, he hasn't had as much as a call back. The engineer's words here, voiced by someone else to protect his identity, outline the problem of companies deciding what the definition of being qualified is.
So typically where marine employers get a leg over Immigration or Maritime New Zealand or any of the other regulatory authorities when they're seeking to bring people in, they go, well, these people are not experienced on the kind of vessels we operate, and it becomes a catch-22 because they won't let you work on the vessels to get experience and then they use that as an excuse not to hire you.
He says he wants to get back to sea in any way, shape or form, not necessarily just on a fishing boat. But across the merchant marine sector, companies are overlooking New Zealanders because foreigners will tolerate tougher conditions for less pay. He says, anecdotally, he's not alone in his experience. The New Zealand Merchant Service Guild's General Secretary, Helen Makara, says the reason for bringing in foreign crews is economic.
They earn very low wages compared to New Zealand conditions. They come from third world labour supply countries and I'd be surprised if they met the New Zealand minimum wage.
Helen Makara says successive governments have swept the problem under the rug, but the pandemic has brought it to light.
This reliance on the foreign low-paid labour has been going on for decades. And initially, the idea was for it to be a transitional measure while the New Zealand workforce was developed, but successive governments just allowed the practice to continue so that there was never a New Zealand workforce developed for these vessels.
The union says that's why people like Vince Scully, who has more than 4 decades seafaring experience and is qualified to captain vessels, is struggling to find work at sea. Mr Scully says companies are deliberately setting the bar too high for New Zealanders to get into the industry.
That's a common problem. We've had that in the offshore in New Zealand for over 15 years. They will say that there's a job coming to New Zealand and they'll look at this, they're asking for CVs and they look at all the CVs and then they're asking for a higher bar than what the locals have qualifications for, and then they will bring in foreigners and the foreigners don't necessarily have the qualification, they have less and they're actually paid less.
Sea Lord, Independent Fisheries and Maruhani Chiro have teamed up to bring more than 400 workers over from Russia and the Ukraine to crew trawlers. The first half of that group arrived on a charter flight from Russia, a pandemic hotspot, earlier this month. Some later tested positive for COVID-19. Independent Fisheries Executive Director Mark Allison has labelled claims the industry is putting up barriers to Kiwis as nonsense. Do you currently have any New Zealand citizens working on your ships?
We do. We have our own staff work on there on a rotational basis. So mainly observer program. The observers were our company-owned observers.
Okay, but not actually within the likes of the factory setup or in engineering roles or those kind of roles.
Not at this stage, no.
And the reason for that?
we have had known people apply for the roles.
He says it's not just fisheries. The entire primary sector struggles to fill roles locally.
Whether you're an inshore fishing operator or a deep-sea factory vessel operator, there's major shortfalls in trained, skilled and drug-free Kiwis that will go to sea.
Checkpoint requested an interview with the Fisheries Minister, Stuart Nash, who advocated on behalf of the industry, but he declined. We also asked to speak to the Immigration Minister, Chris Farfoy, who established the border exceptions, but didn't hear back. While Mr Ellison says the industry has not created barriers for Kiwis to enter roles, the Ministry for Primary Industries says the deep-sea fishing industry committed to removing them to get the border exceptions through. In response to a query about what assurances the fishing industry gave the government about creating future pathways for New Zealanders to fill roles currently taken by foreign workers, the Ministry for Primary Industries says the industry has committed to removing barriers to employing New Zealanders, including reviewing pay structures and business models and investing in training and education. For Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
ACC is to reassess claims for surgical mesh injury. It previously declined. Almost 400 people could have their cases reassessed under new clinical guidelines, which were developed based on the latest medical evidence and understanding of mesh injuries. Catherine Hutton reports.
ACC's announcement arose from a restorative justice process last year, during which 600 mesh-injured people shared their stories through 32 online forums or an online database. It's good news for campaigners like Patricia Sullivan, who co-founded the support group Mesh Down Under. She says as of September, 377 claims dating back to 2005 were declined. Most were women. For those people, ACC is the only avenue for having their medical costs met. The other problem for mesh complications is the major symptom is pain, which until now ACC didn't consider.
It's basically a chronic inflammation occurs and at the site of the mesh, and that can mean that the mesh can contract and it gets stiff and it gets very painful. So people can have abdominal pain, pain at the site of the surgery, internal pain, pain on intercourse, neuropathic, terrible. It's like the worst toothache you could ever imagine.
Charlotte Kerr is a solicitor at John Miller Law and has been involved in several cases involving mesh claimants. She says there are a number of hurdles clients have to cross before ACC will accept the claim. That's before compensation can even be considered. Under ACC's treatment injury criteria, a claimant must show they suffered a physical injury as a result of treatment. For mesh, physical harm includes damage to the nerve, which must be seen, and the damaged nerve must be named.
It's incredibly difficult to identify the damaged nerve and know precisely the mechanism of injury. Our diagnostic tools and perhaps our medical science might not be able to identify microscopic damage to nerves.
She says it's then up to the ACC claimant, who's already suffering from their injuries and is perhaps unable to work, to engage doctors and pay for diagnostic tests to prove the precise nature and location of that damage, which is incredibly onerous for that claimant. Stephen Mark is the president of the Urological Society of Australia and New Zealand and operates on patients who've had complications from mesh where it involves the urinary tract. He welcomes ACC's announcement, saying expanding the claim criteria will help improve the outcomes for patients who've had complications from mesh. That includes the criteria for pain.
The new ACC document clarifies where ACC would cover pain where there was not pain present prior to surgery and no previous pain problems, and the pain was directly linked to the site and the location of the mesh with some objective evidence that there was a problem.
In a statement, ACC says under the new guidelines, where there's clear evidence of mesh erosion or extrusion, specific nerve damage, surgical error or infection caused by treatment, it's now likely to accept the claim. But while it's updated and released new guidelines for gynae claims, it's yet to release new guidelines for those who've suffered complications from hernia treatment, which mostly involves men. Patricia Sullivan is suspicious.
We want to know, when did ACC start writing these hernia guidelines and why are they assessing all mesh claims if the hernia guidelines aren't completed. When will these guidelines be published? And who will be the hernia specialist external assessors looking at these hernia claims?
She also wants more information about what independent oversight there will be of the reassessment process and what, if any, evaluations will be published. She says for a group that has fought for so long, transparency is important. They don't want a rubber-stamping, box-ticking exercise.
We are wanting outcomes, and the only way we will know if these outcomes are robust is if we have a report that evaluates those outcomes and if we know that there's been independent oversight of this process.
ACC says it's continuing to work with external medical experts on its guidelines for hernia mesh claims. In a statement, its Chief Customer Officer, Emma Powell, says,
"There is no time limit for clients to take up this opportunity, and we will be monitoring requests and providing regular updates on the numbers of requests we're receiving and the outcomes of those reassessments. As that progresses, we will consider the appropriate time to collate a report on the outcomes of this process. This regular reporting will ensure the process is transparent."
Meanwhile, Patricia Sullivan expects more people to come forward as a result of today's announcement. ACC says those wanting to have a mesh claim considered should contact ACC or a medical professional. For Checkpoint, Ko Catherine Hutton, TNA.
An earthquake strengthening project, which could cost up to $180 million, has been approved for Wellington's Central Library. Despite popular support for demolishing and building a new one, the council this morning opted instead to strengthen it to the highest standards. Our Wellington reporter Harry Locke reports.
1.5 years after the Central Library was closed down and enveloped by hoardings, the council has now finally decided just what to do with it. With 5 options on the table, councillors unanimously supported the third, high-level remediation. Keep the existing building, but bring it up to scratch, make it as safe as possible, and give it an interior facelift. The Mayor, Andy Foster, describing today as a good day for the city.
We're going to end up with a more resilient building. It'll be more open, it'll be lighter, it'll be modern, it'll be flexible, it'll be able to meet the needs of our diverse community. It is a vote of confidence by this council in our city, and I think we should just say, let's do it.
The decision has the approval of the people who are sunning themselves outside the library this lunchtime.
It's the right decision. I mean, we should just get over the fact whether people like the building or not. They should just fix the damn thing and strengthen it, and it is what it is, and it's a great building. It works really well. People love it. Fix it.
100%. You might as well restore something than chuck it down and waste your resource and get more complications.
Well, as a ratepayer, I'm always interested in how much things cost, but I think it's a building worth restoring. It's worth getting it back to a state that's earthquake-proof.
It's expected to cost somewhere between $160 and $180 million. The only other realistic alternative to consider was the equally expensive option to demolish the existing building and build another one on the same site. Indeed, that option had the most public support, more than 40% of all submitters. The lone voice of dissent, Councillor Malcolm Sparrow, used this fact as the basis for what he saw as a golden opportunity to build a new library.
One that is designed for the 21st century, one that is fit for purpose and highly resilient, better value for money on an ongoing basis, will last longer and is probably less likely to be plagued by escalating costs.
But Councillor Fleur Fitzsimons says there's been a number of significant changes since that consultation was completed, which she says changes the picture.
Many of those people were influenced by cost. We now have much more useful cost work. I think if you unpick the reasoning for it and you consider the further design work that's been done, that it actually would have been, I think, more expensive to demolish and rebuild.
Councillor Tamitha Paul, meanwhile, says it would be a good building gone to waste if demolition was the chosen option.
I was really concerned that it is so wasteful to just destroy a building like that. And, for every tonne of concrete that is poured, that's a tonne of carbon into the atmosphere. So I'm really happy that we'll be able to salvage this.
The building is currently subject to an application by Heritage New Zealand to get it certified as a Category 1 historic place. The threat of legal action if demolition was chosen was another sticking point. Councillors worried opting to knock it down and start over would cause delay after delay.
This is about being pragmatic. The advice we've got is that we can do this, do it quicker, and we can get everything that we want while avoiding a fight that we probably would have had we gone down a different option.
With strengthening now finalised as the way forward, the library is expected to open in May 2025. For Checkpoint, Harry Locke.
Let's get to your feedback for the news at 6 on Halloween. There was some advice from the Ministry of Health that suggested maybe you could give out a toothbrush instead of, or as well as release. This person says, only really miserable people give out toothbrushes, but we offer fruit and it's quite popular. Plain popcorn is also a favourite. Our whole street celebrates Halloween together every year. We trick or treat at houses that have said they want to participate. We know if there are children outside our neighbourhood because we know all the families and kids in the streets nearby. Everyone's welcome though. Don't put much stock in the toothbrush idea, given one of our neighbours gives children apples or carrots each year and the children always look so disappointed, even though they know it's coming.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. The police in Northland are carrying firearms as 2 men who shot at an officer remain on the loose. The officer was alone in a patrol car on State Highway 11 when the incident happened at about 4:15 yesterday morning. Katie Todd reports.
The officer escaped uninjured but shaken with a damaged windscreen. Far North Mayor John Carter says locals are still unnerved and want the men held to account. The police are investigating possible links to people who kidnapped a man near Waipapa and left him near Matodi Bay on the same night, but have not made any arrests yet. They say they are temporarily carrying firearms as a precaution, and that decision is being reviewed regularly. Ko Katie Todd, TNA.
The mother of a baby who died after being attacked by the family dog in Hamilton says she wishes she could go back in time. The newborn baby boy died in Waikato Hospital yesterday after the attack on Sunday night. His mother has posted a photo on Facebook wishing she could return to a time when she was pregnant. Neighbours who rushed to help the mother and her baby say the woman had gone to the toilet when the family dog attacked the infant. Qualified and experienced seafarers are claiming fishing companies are deliberately putting up barriers so a cheaper workforce can be brought in from overseas. In September, the government granted border exemptions for 570 workers to crew deep-sea fishing trawlers. Checkpoint has spoken to a marine engineer with more than a decade's experience at sea, who says when he's applied for jobs in the past, he often hasn't even got a call back. Independent Fisheries Executive Director Mark Allison says the suggestion the industry is blocking Kiwis is nonsense, and there are not enough skilled and experienced New Zealanders willing to do the work. A Christchurch urologist doubts patients who've suffered complications from surgical mesh will have to travel overseas for treatment. It follows ACC's announcement that it will reassess all claims for surgical mesh that it previously declined following the release of new guidelines. Stephen Mark is the president of the Urological Society of Australia and New Zealand and operates on patients who've had complications from mesh, where it involves the urinary tract. He says the system will put pressure on the health system, and while there will be an initial surge in cases, he's confident doctors have the expertise to deal with the problem.
There's a lot of work being done in these areas, and certainly I don't believe at this stage patients need to be encouraged to look overseas for treatment. What we need to do is get our education, our referral and our system set up so that the patients are sent to the right people for the right assessment and right treatment.
Stephen Mark, a Christchurch urologist. The former flatmate of a man accused of murdering his ex-wife says he showed him a meat cleaver he planned on using to dismember the woman. Lee Man-Chao is on trial at the High Court in Auckland after pleading not guilty to murder and breaching a protection order. He is accused of killing his ex-wife, Yang Zhimin, who was fatally attacked with a hunting knife on Westgate Drive in Massey last July. Today, his former flatmate, Gary Gary Prothero said Mr Lee constantly talked about killing his ex-wife and showed him a box of weapons, including a hunting knife and a large meat cleaver. Mr Prothero said Mr Lee appeared to want to kill and then dismember Ms Young over a marital property dispute when that went against him. The trial continues. At a rally in Michigan, Donald Trump has accused Democrats of misleading the country about the impact of the coronavirus in order to discredit him.
They use it to make us look bad. But here's the story. It's COVID, COVID, COVID. You can't watch anything else. On November 4th, you won't be hearing so much about it. Okay? November 4th. On November 4th, you'll hear, it's getting better. It's getting better. You watch. No, they're doing heavy COVID because they want to scare people.
The US President is also travelling to speak to supporters in the state of Nebraska. Earlier, his campaign website was briefly taken down after it fell victim to hackers. The decision to strengthen Wellington's Central Library has been made partly to avoid a legal battle over demolishing it. The library has been closed since March last year after a report found it would be a risk to life in a serious earthquake. Two main options were on the table for councillors today, either strengthen to a high standard or demolish and build something new. They voted unanimously to spend $180 million on fixing the existing building. Wellington's Mayor Andy Foster says with the library being considered for a Heritage Category 1 status, trying to tear it down would be tricky.
This is about being pragmatic. The advice we've got is that we can do this, do it quicker, and we can get everything that we want while avoiding a fight that we probably would have had we gone down a different option.
Andy Foster, the Wellington Mayor. It's 5 minutes past 6. England are focusing on the positives from their enforced stint on the sidelines ahead of the Tiny Jamison Netball series against the Silver Ferns. The Roses take on the world champion Silver Ferns in the first of 3 tests in Hamilton tonight. The first international netball game to be played after the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. England's most capped player, Jade Clark, says despite their lack of court time, the Roses are not making any excuses.
You can't let it affect your confidence that you haven't had those matches, and you've just got to really take the positives in the practice matches and the training sessions that you've had. It's really a test of your self-belief and self-confidence and actually giving each other that confidence. That we might have not had as many games, but we are ready to go.
Jade Clark. The Wellington Phoenix have signed 2 more Kiwi players for the next A-League football season. Defender James McGarry and midfielder Clayton Lewis have both signed 1-year deals. Melbourne's Boxing Day cricket test is scheduled to go ahead with Australia to play India at the MCG in the second match of a 4-test series. Australia will start its international summer with a limited overs series against India, starting at the end of next month before the first test starts in Adelaide on December 17th. The former Deputy CEO of New Zealand Cricket, Anthony Crummey, has been appointed as the new boss of Hockey New Zealand. That's the news. Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
Using the app is preventative, so we can't start using it when the next outbreak occurs. We have to be using it 14 days before the next outbreak.
Lately with me, Susanna Leatawa is your late-night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
They see Marae as no more than a hall or something like that, but it's far more than that. It's our home.
Up to date if you're up late. Lately with Susanna Leatawa, this week from 10 on RNZ National. Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula, Waikato and Bay of Plenty. Fine spells, areas of morning low cloud or fog. Scattered showers, some heavy in inland Northland. Waitomo to Manawatu, including Taumaranui, Taupo and Taihape. Mostly cloudy with a few showers. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Waitatapa cloudy periods, isolated showers for Waitatapa tomorrow morning. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough, fine spells. Bulla and Westland, cloud increasing, periods of rain developing tonight. Canterbury mainly fine but cloudy morning and night, isolated showers about the high country tomorrow. Fiordland, Otago and Southland mostly fine apart from areas of cloud morning and night. A few showers tomorrow, possibly heavy for central Otago in the afternoon. And Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers. RNZ National, it's almost 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Welcome back. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The former flatmate of a man on trial for stabbing a woman to death says the accused was fixated on getting rid of his ex-wife and shared how he planned to do it. Lee Man Chow is on trial at the High Court at Auckland, accused of murdering his ex-wife, Yang Jie-min, on a suburban West Auckland street last July. Our court reporter Annika Smith has more. And just a warning, her report contains details that may be distressing for some people.
Garrick Prothero lived with Lee Man Chow at a flat in Henderson in 2018. He told the jury it was clear from the outset Mr. Lee was obsessed with taking revenge on his ex-wife.
I've got to admit from almost day one, he was sort of fixated with the fact that his ex-wife had done him the dirty, and he was somehow one day going to get even with her.
Mr. Prothero told Crown Prosecutor Nick Webby Mr. Lee referred to his ex-wife as the bitch and did his best to talk down any plans he raised.
What was your response to
I said, don't be stupid. That's ridiculous. Nobody, no woman or no person is worth that sort of action, because at the end of the day you're going to end up in jail, and, who's going to be worse off?
He said Mr. Lee seemed to take his advice on board, but then reverted back to planning.
He showed me a number of rifles that he had.
Yes.
He showed me a hunting knife which he had bought, and a meat cleaver. And that was the interesting thing with the meat cleaver, because he said to me, do you think this would be enough to kill somebody with? And I said, do a pretty good job. And so he went out in the backyard and had a go at a tree and chopped a couple of branches off. And he said, that seems to work all right,
Mr. Prothero said he got the impression Mr. Lee had changed his focus from getting rid of his ex-wife to injuring her in such a way she would not forget the pain she had caused him. He said he grew so uncomfortable he eventually went to the police with his concerns. The jury has now heard Mr. Lee had breached numerous protection orders against him over the years. Yang Jie-min told police he had appeared at her work and in a supermarket car park and stood in front of her and just stared. In a statement she made when applying for her final protection order, read aloud in court by Constable Sarah Brooks-Smith, Ms. Young said she was scared.
I don't know how crazy Man Chow Lee could go. I'm scared of going grocery shopping. Scared of answering phone calls when I don't know the caller number. Scared of anyone knocking on my door. I live on my own. I can only rely on the court and the police for protection.
Constable Renee Beveridge served Mr. Lee his final protection order in April 2019, 2 months before Ms. Young was fatally attacked. She said his reaction, given everything that had happened, was odd.
It struck me a little odd that he seemed to be almost in disagreement for why he should be receiving the protection order.
Today, the jury also heard Mr. Lee launched an anti-crime petition after numerous burglaries at the home he and Ms. Young shared when they were together. The petition, calling for harsher penalties, was accepted by former MP and Deputy ACT leader Kenneth Wang. The trial continues. Atuite ko ti matua ko Annika Smith aho.
Right, let's take a complete change of direction. A number of you thought last night's story about an alleged Black Panther was the cat's meow. Christchurch osteopath Mark Orr was mountain biking on the Perseverance track near Hanmer about midday on Sunday when he swears he saw a Black Panther prowling the path ahead of him. Now, photos are on Facebook if you want to check it out. He's not the first person to claim he's seen the fabled big cat. There's been plenty of alleged sightings since the 90s. So, could it really be a panther? Where would it have come from and what's it snacking on? James Ross is an associate professor of ecology at Lincoln University. He's not convinced about the cat.
I mean, these things get up to 200 to 250 pounds. Standing on their back legs, they're 8 feet off the ground. I think he would have made more of an impression.
So what are your reckons, James? What do you think it could be? Have you had a look at the photos?
I have. It's difficult. Initially looking at it, it does look cat-like. It's hard to tell with the scale. I mean, feral cats can get pretty big, but I mean, there's still a huge difference between, say, something that's 8 to 10 kilos compared to something that's over 100 kg. I don't know, dog, goat even. It's a difficult one to know. I mean, I suppose the big question for me would be, what's it living on?
And what makes you raise that question?
So I have a student that worked on leopards in Pakistan, and leopards are smaller than panthers. These things eat deer, they eat big animals. You would think there'd be livestock being predated on, they would be got even people's pets disappearing or something. These things they're carnivores, they eat a lot of meat. You think there'd be reports of something going on in the area that would substantiate it.
Okay, so that's the first piece of evidence again, no nighttime raids on animals or meat seeking by some creature from the woods. But the other thing is, where could it have come from if it actually was some kind of legitimate big cat?
Well, someone would have had to have brought it in illegally. I don't know how they could do it any other way. I mean, looking at, I was just having a look at the mammals that have been legally introduced into New Zealand, and there's no big cats in there, so it's not something that could have got introduced by an acclimatisation society 100 years ago. So someone would have had to have illegally brought it in, and whether or not it's then escaped or, I mean, who knows? It just seems a bit, considering how particular we are around borders, it would be quite difficult to do.
What about an escaped animal and some kind of crossbreeding?
Yeah, again, I don't know the source. I don't know if we've got them in captivity. I haven't had a look around at the other zoos, but I would have thought they would have reported losing a panther. Could it breed with other ones? I don't know what other species it would be able to breed with in New Zealand.
So are you a betting man, James?
Oh, yeah, I'll take a punt.
Okay, what would you put your money on this being?
Unlikely, but, you know, these sightings do come up from time to time. I think they definitely saw something. It might be concerning if there's some big, large feral dogs running around the place as well. You know, people still claim to have seen moa and moose down in Fiordland. These sightings come up from time to time. I mean, if they were serious, yeah. I mean, let's put some trail cameras out, or you think we would have some more evidence. If a big animal like that was living there, you would think there'd be certainly more evidence.
Oh, that's laying down a challenge.
Well, I mean, if it's using the trails, I mean, it wouldn't be difficult to put trail cameras up or something, but, I mean, that thing's got to be feeding on something. If it was real, I don't know if I'd be wanting to put my pets out.
So this could potentially be sort of like New Zealand's, I don't know, Loch Ness Monster or Yeti, because over the years there have been a number of sightings that people reckon are big cats.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, you know, definitely they've seen something. It's different. They're not sure what it is. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of other things here that you would think if we could go to the sites, there'd be some evidence of scats or fur or something that you could DNA test, but we generally never get anything like that to substantiate it. It'd be an interesting story to follow. Usually, though, what happens, isn't it, is after one of these is seen, then there's a whole lot of reports of something similar being seen as well. So who knows what will happen next.
That's James Ross, Associate Professor of Ecology at Lincoln University. So the mystery continues. Email all evidence to checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's head to the US now, and the US city of Philadelphia is experiencing a night of unrest after the police shooting of another black man. The police say officers opened fire on Walter Wallace Jr. after he ignored orders to drop a knife. The shooting was filmed on a cell phone. The BBC's Mark LaBelle has more.
On Monday afternoon in the neighbourhood of Cobbs Creek in West Philadelphia, this happened. Two officers respond to a report of a man with a weapon. He breaks free from his mother after she says she tried to shield him. Police say they then tell the 27-year-old to drop his weapon. Then this. He was pronounced dead at hospital. His father asked later why police didn't first use a taser.
Oh my God!
Mr. Wallace's family lawyer said they had called for an ambulance, not the police.
It's an unjustified shooting. We have a person who has mental health issues. We're going to vet those out as the process continues. But we have officers who I think are not properly trained to deal with those mental health issues.
Philadelphia's Mayor Jim Kenney called it a tragic incident, pledging a full investigation.
This is not only a matter that is being carefully considered by the head of our Special Investigations Unit and the assigned prosecutor. It's a matter that I am looking at personally and carefully. This office has made clear that we believe in fairness. We believe in even-handed justice. We are not out to cover for anybody, and we are not out to get anybody.
There was visible anger on the streets of Philadelphia. Hundreds of protesters faced down riot police, injuring several officers and looting multiple businesses. The White House had said they're prepared to deploy federal resources to enforce the law. In a statement released on Tuesday, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris said, "Our hearts are broken for the family of Walter Wallace Jr., another black life in America lost." At the same time, they added, addressing the looting, "No amount of anger at the very real injustices in our society excuses violence." It's above all another tragic early end to a black life in America of a father, twin and son, leaving another city on edge.
Mark LaBelle reporting from Philadelphia there. It is 19 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A bunch of you getting in touch about supermarket pricing, and this is in response to a Pack and Save in Mangere being fined $78,000 for overcharging customers on some items. Now, Gordon's got in touch to say about another listener who emailed us about checking your receipt. Gordon says, your listener's comments strike a chord with me regarding supermarket overcharges. Checkout operators do indeed ask you if you would like a receipt on the premise of being eco-friendly. But in my experience, not only do they overcharge, but they often offer discounts only to charge you full price at the checkout. Faro, Gordon reckons, is the worst at this. I always ask for a receipt and check. So should you, ! Says Gordon. And Joe says, I always check my docket and have to call the supervisor more often than not. It's been going on for years because nobody takes their receipts anymore. I think that's true. I don't think many people do take the receipts. And also in COVID, you kind of, well, I don't know, we're a bit sort of iffy about taking your receipt. This listener says, have noticed and told the cashier a couple of times, but when you do a proper shop, it's near impossible to remember, and reporting it can be time consuming. It's happened not just at supermarkets but at other big chain stores also, says that listener. Okay. Researchers who are also former wards of the state have stressed the key changes needed to ensure any Māori-run alternative to Oranga Tamariki doesn't just turn a white bureaucracy into a brown one. The second week of the Waitangi Tribunal hearing into the disproportionate number of Tamariki Māori in state care is underway in Hastings, and claimants have told the tribunal transforming the system which cares for vulnerable Tamariki Māori is about more than just transferring power and resources to a Māori authority. Mediana Johnson reports.
Lawyer Annette Sykes says the treaty breach that lies at the heart of her claimant's joint submission is simple.
Our whakapapa is embedded into the land of this country. It is that whakapapa that is being severed by the actions of the Crown. I could not, in all my time in these proceedings, think of anything more horrendous than the severance and disconnection of children from their whānau and their whakapapa.
She says transferring power and resources to a Māori authority alone will not fix the problem.
There seems to be this suggestion by some witnesses, by simply transferring the functions and the resources from Oranga Tamariki, there will be the transformative change that we seek. We want to be very clear and on the record now, without these other suite of recommendations, it will only be notional.
One of the recommendations is an overhaul of the family group conference process. That is proposed by Paula Moyle, a former ward of the state and a social worker of over 30 years. For her masters, she studied how family group conferences target Māori rather than strengthen them, and says as it currently stands, the conferences do not assess the whānau according to their worldview and strengths.
It's not an Indigenous process or Māori-fied. It's not a whānau a hui a whānau. You can't put a Māori name to a process that bastardises our people and call it okay.
Moyle says in the short term, Oranga Tamariki must employ skilled tikanga Māori advocates and ensure all employees have cultural competency. She says social work training needs to cover institutional racism, genocide and white supremacy, as well as teaching about Māori principles and practices of collective well-being. Dr. Alison Green is completing her postdoctoral research in the similarities of the state removal of Indigenous children across colonial countries. She points to Canada, where Indigenous nations, such as Inuit and Métis, have the power to create and enforce their own legislation to protect their tamariki. They also have the power to require the state to return any of their children taken by government authorities. She says the problem in New Zealand is the state refuses to relinquish control and always retains the ability to override decisions made by Māori.
We need an interim Māori authority to develop a transition plan and process that moves hapu and iwi jurisdiction for tamariki and Māori out from under the Crown and into our own self-determining spheres.
Ms Green says an interim Māori authority made up of leaders from hapu, iwi and Māori groups should be set up to slowly draw away funding and resources from Oranga Tamariki. The authority would also develop a national Māori protection plan. The hearing will continue tomorrow with submissions from investigative reporter and PhD candidate on Māori children in state custody, Aaron Smale, and Ngāti Kahungunu leader Ngahiwi Tomoana. Mo te hōtaka o Te Ahiahi, ko Midiana Johnson DNA.
Back to the States now, and President Trump has had a roller coaster day, campaigning in 4 separate states, from Michigan to Nevada, in a last-ditch attempt to overcome Joe Biden's lead in the opinion polls and secure 4 more years in the White House. Here's our US correspondent, Simon Marks.
There's 1 week left for Americans to cast their ballots. Put everything you know about Election Day to one side. It doesn't exist anymore. Thanks to huge enthusiasm for early voting, more than 64 million Americans have already done their duty, like these voters in New York City.
I actually came yesterday and I left because the line was like 2 hours long.
I mean, I did wait 2.5 hours, but that's what this cell phone is for. So I listen to music. Gave me my sticker, which I have.
All over the country, they're doling out those I voted stickers faster than they can print them. Russell Hollis works in the county clerk's office in Marion County, Indiana, where more than 100,000 people voted over the weekend.
We did add more machines on Sunday. On Sunday morning, we did see smaller wait times, but ultimately, it was a sea of voters that just flocked to all of our voting sites on Saturday.
So the candidates are making their closing arguments, and Joe Biden trekked to the town of Warm Springs in Georgia. If the name is familiar, it should be. It's where Franklin Delano Roosevelt used to retreat when he wanted to escape Washington. The place where the former president planned the taxpayer-funded New Deal that took America out of the Great Depression. Exactly the kind of government program Joe Biden is considering to get America out of the great pandemic.
Think about all those who have died. They were giving their all while their president was giving up. Well, I'm here to tell you, we can and we will control this virus. As president, I will never wave the white flag of surrender.
President Trump doesn't want to talk about COVID-19 anymore. On Twitter, he assailed the media, insisting it's our obsession, not the public's. Cadences that he articulates wherever he goes.
We're rounding the turn. You know, all they want to talk about is COVID. By the way, on November 4th, you won't be hearing so much about it.
But America is not rounding the turn. There have been 500,000 new infections in the past week alone, and in some states, hospital systems are rationing intensive care beds. But rather than challenge Joe Biden's plan to tackle coronavirus, which is itself absolutely open to criticism, the president wants to move the campaign in a different direction.
While America's cities burned, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris fanned the flames, refusing to strongly condemn violence.
His latest ad attacks the Democrats for burying the issue of violence in America's cities, falsely suggesting urban areas from coast to coast are ablaze. rise.
In Joe Biden's America, we'll all be in danger.
President Trump is engaged in a battle for his political life. It's taking him to 4 separate states today, where he's celebrating the arrival of Amy Coney Barrett on the bench of the Supreme Court.
I, Amy Coney Barrett, do solemnly swear.
Her swearing in on Monday night could change America's trajectory for decades to come. The Republicans certainly hope it will galvanise their supporters to show up at the polls. With 64 million voters having already cast their ballots, you might be wondering who will be left to show up at polling stations next Tuesday. Well, back on the streets of New York this morning, we found him.
It's the regular day, that's why. I like the same on Tuesdays. I like it that way. Then I used to go out and get drunk.
A man with a plan, and he's probably not the only one. For Checkpoint, I'm Simon Marks in Washington.
There's just 1 week to go until that incredibly important presidential election, but an intense campaign's also brewing at the Alaska Zoo. As Taylor Clark reports, one candidate is quickly clawing his way to the top.
Ooh, it's a tough race. It's a tough race. It's a heated race. It's a passionate race.
A race with a massive brown bear taking an early lead at the Alaska Zoo.
There's Mr. Izzy. He's going to be our future president of the zoo, you guys.
Izzy is the favored candidate for president of the Alaska Zoo so far. His handler, Sam Lavin, speaks on his behalf, as any good campaign manager would.
I don't know if you can see him. He is a large brown bear. He's amazing.
Lavin says the first-time candidate is running on some key issues.
Izzy is a very food-driven bear, and he thinks everyone should be as food-driven as he is.
A bear who knows how to take what he wants and give it back to his fellow zoo residents.
So everyone gets lots and lots of food.
However, this election isn't one on votes, but campaign donations.
So it's a fundraiser for us, and every dollar is a vote. So you can vote often, and you can vote a lot. Their best
Lavin says a vote for Izzy is a vote for all bear kind, and whatever else his constituents might be.
You know, he wants everybody to be happy and healthy and be a good ambassador for their species.
And undoubtedly, more salmon sickles for everybody.
Taylor Clark reporting there. The last word goes to Steve today on Halloween. The Fun Police want to stop lollies for Halloween. Give the kids a break. We've had enough stress with COVID this year. So not handing out toothbrushes?
NZ News headlines at 6:30. One of 2 men charged by the Serious Fraud Office over the handling of donations to the New Zealand First Foundation has pleaded not guilty and will go to trial. Police officers in Northland are carrying firearms, while men who shot at a police officer yesterday remain on the loose. Police in Philadelphia say hundreds of looters are ransacking businesses in a second night of unrest after officers shot and killed a young black man. The next census in 2023 will collect information on gender and sexual identity for the first time, which Stats NZ says will better inform decision-making for the groups. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tonight on Nights, there's a window on the world of food and US politics, because they do mix, and that will go nicely with the final of Maria Amudian's examination of the US presidential